Welcome to Free Your Inner Guru, Nafissa. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laura. I know we've been planning this for a long time, so I'm glad to finally be able to do this. It's so much fun.
Yeah. So let's start by, I would love the listener to meet you as if for the first time. Tell us a little bit about your coaching practice, your horses,
Sure.
how it all comes together. It's fascinating.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as you know, as we talked a little bit off camera before we started, I'm in a little bit of transition, but primarily I've been working with entrepreneurs for years to help them build their businesses and multiply their income. I refer to myself as their income growth mentor. Um, but, you know, the income that we make in our business is usually just a reflection of everything that we believe about ourselves and what's possible. And so, my background in corporate, which I know we may or may not get into, was very, very business driven, very left brain. And when I started my business and I started getting into all those tactics, I found it didn't matter how much people knew what to do. They didn't necessarily always do it. So I became fascinated with what went on between their ears, right? And so as I started to expand that, I started to learn other modalities about subconscious belief change psychology. And I've been a horsewoman for quite a long time, and working with horses myself, just seeing the transformation in me and how they um, really needed me to show up to be a leader, which was totally not necessarily related to my business, but a lot of the lessons could apply in my business. I'd never actually bridged the two, but a lot of my own vulnerabilities came out when I started to work with horses. Then I started to learn about this field of equine assisted learning, equine assisted psychotherapy. I don't do the psychotherapy, obviously, but I mean, it goes that deep. But the learning, the coaching, and horses teacher. And so I learned through life and through training how horses also help you tap into that deep subconscious parts of you. They're energetic beings. And so I morphed that with my business coaching practice to create something somewhat unique, where I've worked with entrepreneurs to really help them get clear, get aligned, build confidence. And so a good portion of my business is online. And then um, we last year introduced horses and retreats and private retreats to the coaching, which has been really popular and successful for my clients too.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's weave our way into it,
Yeah.
because I'm always fascinated by what people like yourself did in their before life, like
Mhm.
before you had your own business. And so you mentioned you were in the private sector. So what type of role did you have there? Was it a leadership role?
Yes, I worked in mining, gold mining and copper mining. They're the CPA association now, but when I had my education, it was CGA in Canada. So I did my 10 years of school to get my accounting designation. And I never really liked accounting. Like it just, I'm not a fine details kind of person. I'm a big picture person. And the part I enjoyed most about all the jobs that I had was working with people and mentoring people. So that kind of was just always, when you look back and connect the dots, it was always there, but I didn't know how to do that in the business world because I was taught, you get a education, you get a job, you go work. And so this was very tangible. It was a skill that I knew everybody needed somebody to count their money. So I became an accountant, but I didn't really enjoy it. And so when I had my first opportunity to go work in something a little bit more operational, it still required understanding business fundamentals and money fundamentals, but not necessarily like your debits and credit fundamentals. So I was working in construction, and so project accounting was a lot more fun for me because it wasn't about all these crazy rules. It was about really tracking your construction build and how it was going, and you were creating and building something. And so I worked at for a couple of years here in Vancouver. There was a huge tourist attraction that went up. It was called Storium. It's not here anymore, but it was a massive $20 million project. And so that was my first exposure really to working on project accounting and creating something really creative because it was a theater production. And so that was really fun. And so I didn't want to go back to doing like, boring financial statements or
Mm.
any of that kind of stuff, or auditing or taxation. So when I left that business and I went into mining, it was really fun because I got to work on, again, it was a different type of creation, but I went to work for exploration companies where they were just doing the feasibility analysis on these projects and on these mineral deposits, and working with First Nations communities. Up in Alaska, they're called Native corporations. So there's, I mean, that's how they prefer to be called. That's not like, if I would call them First Nations up there, they'd be like, no, we're Native corporations. So I'd
Mm.
have to watch my language depending where I was, right? So, but working with them to help them learn self-sufficiency skills and start their own businesses, and work with them to give them high-paying jobs and train them. So that became really fun for me, and building these projects. And so I had a really unique role where it still involved money, because we still had to account for um, eh, shareholders money, and the project money. But it was just about, like, it was about, what do we spend on a helicopter this week, not what like our financial statements were. So I was in that industry and I loved it. It was so much fun. There was something about going out to these mine sites and playing in the mud and going to camp. I mean, I wasn't a camp employee. I worked up in Alaska, but I had an apartment. I was in Nome for a year. I don't know if people know where Nome, Alaska is, but
I don't. Where's that?
it's just below the Arctic Circle. You can only get there by plane or barge, and the barge only, and you don't travel there by barge. That's how goods get in. So they have a barging season that comes up, like, I think it's like a 3-month window, because the barges can't get up there after that, and everything else then is flown in like through the winter, like groceries and stuff. And people would leave their cars running with keys in them in the winter to keep them warm, because where were people going to steal them? There weren't roads to go anywhere, right? So it was pretty far north. And we used to eat so much king crab up there, because that was cheaper than meat, like than ground beef, because you could just, people go drop their crab pots and bring them in. It was quite a unique experience, and I had an apartment up there. And then I ended up working in Anchorage on a different project. But I would go out to the campsites from time to time and spend a few days at these remote campsites and sleep in tents in the middle of winter, um, in Alaska.
Oh,
So
that's exciting.
it was fun, right? I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed a lot of the work we did. I think one of the funnest projects I had was sitting on, I think it was called the Best in the West, and it was having all of these people from the local villages encouraging entrepreneurism. And so there was a purse they could win, and they had to come. It was kind of like a dragon's den, where they'd come to you with their pitch and their business idea, and if it was viable, they could have, you would award a portion of the purse to these businesses. So that was really cool to be working in businesses that were helping the community, that really got into making sure that the people that we would be relying on, the people whose land we'd be working on, had access to the jobs, had access to training, had access to lots of opportunity in different ways, whether it was directly working for us, or working for a company that would support it, or doing something like this competition of these entrepreneurs. And so I loved it. And then when that ended, I went and worked, still in mining. I worked, I can't remember which way I did it. I went to the Yukon for a couple of years, and I also worked in Arizona. I preferred the weather in Arizona to all of them. So, and that was in copper mining, and I was in Arizona for not too long, for just under a year. But my home base was always Vancouver, but I would travel to these places, and it was all the same thing. It was all project development and community development and community engagement. So I really enjoyed it.
You're reminding me of the when we first met back in 2017, and we had a chance to follow. It was a busy time, and we
Mhm.
followed up afterwards, and
Yeah.
we're trading our stories of our career paths,
Yeah.
which are very different from each other's. Definitely some common themes,
Hmm.
but I started adding up all the years in my head, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, and we may have talked about it, like, you're, not to make it about the superficial, but you're I call people like you look younger, like you look younger
Yes, I'm
than
turning 50 this year.
right,
So
right. And
yes,
I'm 3 years older than you, so I find
another
definitely,
look younger. Yeah.
I think there's a whole conversation about there that we can just defer to another time maybe, but it's about, like, oh man, I'm 53, and I'm still having to take people through my CV so they get an idea that I have actual valuable experience, that before what they see online, let's say, because the internet wasn't even really a thing when I was doing a bunch of this stuff.
No, and even when I was in corporate, it was an obstacle. I remember I was talking to when I before because I got assigned up to these projects, but I remember when I was still working the corporate office, I went to talk to our chief operating officer about something, and I don't know what I said, and he always treated me very respectfully, and because of my position and my title, I was manager of operational accounting for the corporation, and I went and I said something to him, and I can't remember what exactly I said, and I think I was like 37 or 38 at the time, and he goes, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 37, 38, whatever it was." He goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "I thought you were like 22."
Yeah.
And how he treated me from that day forward changed, right? So it's not always a good thing.
No, in fact, it almost rarely in the professional setting.
Yeah,
Um, I guess it depends on what the goals are and what the experience. If you're speaking, say, at a health and wellness fair about self-care,
yeah,
then it's a total advantage. If
yeah,
you are in a room full of executives, particularly, both, and you know what, I was going to say men, but I think women can be the harshest critics as
yeah,
well,
yeah,
going, oh yeah, what does she know? What is she talking about?
yeah,
And I used to always just get so, every time in the automotive industry that I would start another client and go through that whole proving cycle, I'd be like, oh my God, this is
yeah,
exhausting,
yeah,
but always worth it. But
yes.
just an interesting sidebar, or not,
Yeah.
as
Well,
the
I mean, now that I'm turning 50, I don't mind looking,
no,
38 or 40, but
no,
it was a career detriment because the initial thought was that I was 10 or 15 years younger than I was, and that did not help. Like people thought I needed experience that already had. And I remember even when I first started in my coaching practice, I remember being at an event with my coach at the time, and somebody there said to me, because we'd been in this program for a year or something, and this was back in 2013 maybe. She goes, "I just have to apologize to you. I just thought you were just some young ditzy girl, all pretty, but you're really smart and you have a lot of background and substance." I'm like, what? I can't.
thank you.
Thank you, right? But so I like it is kind of funny, but it's one of those things now where I'm like, okay, look, I actually have gray hair, so that's
Yeah, I've earned it.
yeah.
um, so what and when and how did you transition from the sort of private sector corporate life into, at that time you would have described it yourself as a business coach or a business consultant? So
Well,
you
actually, that I didn't go directly into being a business consultant. I took a little detour into being a health coach, because I was pretty jaded with the corporate world. I had done really, really well. It's one of those things. It's funny because people. I remember the time that my picture was on the front cover of our annual report, for one of the companies I worked for, and I thought it was really cool. And our investor relations person said, "Yep, we have our token brown girl on there." And I was like, "What?" Because I never saw myself as a minority, but apparently a lot of people did. But I mean, I feel like I created what I did because I just never saw myself as a woman, as an ethnic minority, a religious minority. Like I never saw that. I just saw myself as a person who was contributing, and I just worked really hard. Um, so, but if I were to actually take a step back and look at it and go, I actually did really well. I mean, I eventually made it to a VP level in a total man's world as a minority, and it was pretty cool, right? And by time I was 40, I had made $1 million in 1 year. Like I just did really well, and paid off my house, and I had a great corporate career, and I worked with people who really respected me and treated me really well. The company I worked for was a small junior exploration company, and we were in a joint venture with a major, major company. And that major company treated me like I was one of their executives. So, it's really easy when you're in a small company to be like part of the senior management because like it's small, right? And you get
right.
noticed even if you're just not that high up or whatever, because there's only maybe 20 or 30 people. But in a company that has thousands and thousands of employees, when you stand out and you get noticed by their senior C-suite, at something. But that's only because I was on this particular project. I had visibility. So, it was a really cool job. But things changed as they always do. There were different management structure changes, different things that happened. And this was during like the 2008 downturn, when the company I was in ran into trouble raising money because they were not a income positive, a cash flow positive company
Mm.
yet. So so the way those companies live and make money is they raise money on the capital markets. So who was investing in companies in 2008? So nobody, but they needed cash. So they ended up getting some investors. But of course, when people come in as big investors, they suddenly want to start taking over. So it took a couple of years, but then there was a lot of changes at the top level from these new investors that had come in. So um, things changed, and a lot of the people that I worked with were what's the word, like pushed out,
Yeah.
asked to leave, and I still had a job, or the way I say it is I kept my employment, but I lost my job.
Ah,
And so it's one thing when you don't like what you're doing and you're getting on a commuter bus or a commuter train every day and going downtown or something, right? But I was going to a different country and I hated it. And I remember the new leader that came in, who is now my new boss. You know, he didn't give me the same respect. There was a lot of baggage between him and the fellow that I used to report to, and that because him and I had a really good working relationship, that baggage translated over. So it was just really uncomfortable. And I remember I was in my kitchen at home in Vancouver. My husband and I had gone out for donaires. We were eating takeout, and I got this email that was so horrific and rude and condescending and just not like it. Just I felt ugh. And I remember sitting there looking at this and going, "What?" Right? And I took my donaire and flung it across the kitchen, like just, and it exploded everywhere. And there I was standing in the middle of an exploded donaire all over my kitchen floor. My husband's like, "I think you're done." I'm like, "Yeah, I think you're right." And it was BlackBerry. I didn't have an iPhone then. I just BlackBerry. I quit. That was a really good career. I was making so much money, and I quit in the middle of a donaire that I threw. So but I still dabbled in the mining industry. I ended up taking contracts in the Yukon, the contract down in Arizona. But during that time, I was creating a different way. Like I had worked with a coach for quite a while, an executive coach when I was at this other role, which was what
mhm.
helped me get to the level that I did. She helped me become the person that I needed to be in that role. And so I continued to work with her, but I was so convinced of the power of coaching because of what I experienced, right? Going from a $50,000 a year job to in 1 year making just under seven figures, right? Because of who I became. And I became that through the coaching. So I knew that this was a really powerful work. But at the time, I had done a huge personal transformation. I'd lost a lot of weight. I'd won a couple of figure competitive competitions. And so I thought I was going to be a health coach because I wanted nothing more to do with business. That whole thing left me with a bad taste in my mouth, and I didn't do very well as a health coach.
Oh, so interesting. I didn't know that about you, and I also think there's something really the word that's coming is basic, and not in terms of like to undermine it, but like base, like at the base of the journey of rejecting you know, what you ultimately are meant to be doing or something like that. There's kind of this stage to go through where we come back to it from a different point of
From a
view. Did that
different point.
happen with you, like after you
A,
had
a little
gone
bit,
out?
yeah. I mean, I found that I enjoyed the health piece for myself, not for coaching people on it. But I really liked working with business. But again, that's kind of how I went um, into it as like a business consultant. I still had my CGA at the time. I was labeling myself the profitability expert, but I still didn't get the results for myself or my clients that I do have now. I mean, partly I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur, and having worked in mining and being behind the scenes and a company that brings money in through raising it in the markets, I didn't know how to sell, right? So I never learned how to sell. So that was a really big thing. Um, so I didn't really enjoy that aspect of of the coaching, and I started to learn more about mindset and universal law and really your subconscious mind, how it affects you. And so I started to get really interested in like why people do what they do or why they don't do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I started taking like, deeper courses like NLP's, a modality. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's called Psych K, where you learn how to do subconscious transformation to help people become what we call whole brained to ideas and to get into more productive states. So it started a journey. And so for me, um, I used to pride myself on my Microsoft Excel skills. Like I could do pivot tables and the most complicated formulas ever. And now I have no idea how to even work it. I like to work with the people. And that became more interesting to me. And I realized with entrepreneurs, just like me, people start a business because they have their passion, because they have a purpose, because they want to do something more than go sit chained behind a desk. They want to have meaning in their lives. And so that became a lot more valuable to me as a contribution to make is how do you help people get there? Because it, the marketing is like, oh, do you have a 6-figure business? Do you have a 7-figure business? Like whatever all that is, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean anything. It's like, do you have the life you want, and are you contributing the way you want, and are you making the money that that contribution and life that you want requires? Let's help you get there. And that became more fun. So it was kind of like a long journey, right? Like I threw that donaire. It was April 9th, 2011 that I flung it across a room.
9 years.
Yeah, yeah,
9 years.
yeah.
So that's super interesting. Oh, I've got a question percolating. I may do an edit here if it takes me too long because I had a thread to pick up with you. I know what it was.
Ah,
Um, so let me just do a quick 346 or something like that. There we go. Why do you think it is that with the marketing for the coaching, like you
mhm.
just said, it's like 6 figures this, 7 figures that, when at the core, well, the core of my idea of coaching is about personal growth and transformation.
Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure not too long ago in this conversation, you said something very, very important, which is it's not really about the money. It's about what's going on inside
yeah,
that helps you or keeps you from going after or achieving or just even thinking that you're good enough, worthy enough, lovable
yeah.
enough to create these things for yourself. So if that's where the value is, and that's been the value of your journey, it's
Hmm.
been the value and the challenge of my journey.
Yeah.
Why do you think that all of the marketing, or what seems to work, or what at least in my experience, has been like, in order to grow that coaching practice, you almost have to go down that route to be able to get the mind share?
Um, I'm going to take a step back and look at it not from being like a coach with a business, but somebody who would be hiring a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what those numbers meant. All I knew is I wanted to make enough money to continue the lifestyle that I had, right? And that's all I knew. And I had myself, I had so much business experience, and yet I fell flat on my face as an entrepreneur. So clearly, um, business experience and entrepreneurial knowledge are two very different things, right? It doesn't help you. Um, so for me, I wanted to see that. And so when I saw people that I would hire as mentors could help people get the results I was looking for, I went for it. And I think people it's tangible because coaching isn't tangible. And I liken it to, there was a few years ago, I did a fitness program that I participated in called Fit in 42. And it was like a 42-day program. You'd be fit in 42 days. And I thought to myself, that's pretty good marketing, because if they'd actually marketed it as you're going to get up at 4, you're going to be here at 4:45 a.m. We're going to completely change the way you eat here on in and afterwards. We're going to work you really hard. You're going to go deep. You're going to face all your demons. You're going to cry. You're going to scream. Like nobody would sign up. So they,
Yeah.
right? But fit in 42 makes sense, right? Really easy.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same with the marketing. Is like people just think this number means success, or it means something to them. And um, I don't like to use the word lucky, because I don't believe in luck. I believe you make your own. Um, but me, I was always very determined and scrappy. And, if people would tell me no, or you're not qualified, I'd be like, I might not be qualified, but I'm qualified to get qualified. Like, this was just how I viewed myself. So getting to a point where I was making multi six figures as a woman was through a lot of work. And I surpassed a lot of people that I worked with in corporate. And I think that there's just this perception, like $50,000 or $60,000 is kind of a very common salary.
Mm-hmm.
So when people think of six figures, it just seems like this big magic number, without realizing, but I mean, it could cost you six figures to make six figures if you're not careful, right? So
Yes.
um, I just think there's some mystery to it, because a lot of people maybe haven't done it.
Interesting. Interesting.
And it's very tangible.
It is. It's measurable and it's tangible, but it's also just an approach, or I mean, maybe I it's interesting. Maybe I either just need to get over it,
Hmm.
or just realize, like I was sharing with you before the call, come at it differently, as far
Yeah.
as, if that's what it takes to be um successful and I'm talking about the marketing
Yeah.
of the coach and of
Hmm.
the self-help program. If that's what it takes to be successful, either suck it up and become it, or find another way with where I don't have to compromise core values to achieve it, because
I don't think you should ever
I
compromise core
don't believe.
values, though, right?
Exactly,
You know, I
exactly.
I will use the income-based marketing, if my clients put that in their testimonials, because that obviously was important to them,
Hmm.
and I think that's a big deal. Um, as I've morphed more into the equine work, um, there's some pretty cool results, and the experience is also a really big thing too.
Mm.
Obviously right now, I don't know when people will be listening to this, we're right in the middle of the COVID lockdown, so there is no equine work happening here, but it will come back. And it's been a different approach, because when we talk about coaching, it's like, don't sell process, sell results. Don't sell process, sell results. The results are still there with the horses, like they really are, because you tap into some of the deepest stuff inside you when you're with them. They're energetic beings, and at the same time, the whole process is really magical, and it's something people want, right? Because there's a mystery to it. So that for me has been a lot more enjoyable to market the experience and the emotion,
Mm.
because you get to go really deep there. um, you kind of bring the two together. And I've we've been talking beforehand. I've been going through a little bit of a transformation myself the last few months. As I mentioned, my mom passed away just before the world shut down. So, and then everything I had planned for this summer with my business has been canceled, because I can't have people here. And even the work that I do with the horses, you can't actually stay 6 feet apart safely. Like
Mm.
riding lessons, you can, you
Yeah.
can, you can, tack the horse up, somebody can get on it, and then you can walk away and keep it. But because, like, keep your distance. But because of what I do, I have to be near them for safety, because the horses are completely at liberty. So it was really, that was a bit of a blow, to say the
To
least,
say
right?
the least. Can
Okay,
we?
so we're on pause this summer. So when I think about the marketing piece, I think about, okay, well, let's talk about what people really want. And people are going through that right now. Like, what do you really want out of life? And my marketing was getting a little bit more towards that. Like, we were really using the word alchemy, because I really believe in the transformation of being out in nature, being with these horses. So what do we want to transform? And um, like, there's a result you want. And when I work with people too, if they tell me they want to make six figures, I always ask them why.
Yeah.
Because just going after a number for a number is scarcity thinking.
Well, and long before I was ever introduced to the idea of scarcity thinking.
Mhm.
One thing I know for me is that, and this is where it's like you start to connect the dots the more
Yeah.
you get to know yourself, is that even when I was like that rookie salesperson who became Rookie of the Year in North America, I became that in my first year of being a salesperson, and I was selling like deals in worth, for a contract period in the millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something to get my head around, as far as being able to communicate the value of this thing, that it just so happened that the clients, most of them resented, because it was the technology in the car dealerships.
Mm-hmm.
Because dealers want to sell cars and be with people. They're
Yeah.
generally, unless it's the
Yeah.
corporate model, they're generally very gregarious,
Yeah.
extroverted people, and the last thing they want to spend time thinking about is their computer system, their
Yeah.
mainframe and software and this and that.
Yeah.
And not for one heartbeat was my motivation for that year and that achievement anything to do with the money. My motivation was, President's Club trip this year is in Ireland.
Yeah.
I didn't even understand my compensation model. It was so convoluted. All I knew was I was going to Ireland,
Yeah.
and nothing was going to keep me from going there. And
Yeah.
and that was my compass.
Yeah.
Everything else that happened, incidental to that, like trophies, and I use my Rookie of the North Year. It's a beautiful doorstop here
Mm-hmm.
in my office. It is the nicest
Yeah.
doorstop ever, I will say. I should
Yeah.
show it to you. It's gorgeous, but it functions very well in that role. And um and so when you are looking to coach and guide somebody who isn't money motivated, if you set, it's like it's like a false premise, because that's not going to be enough to move them
No,
internally to take the
it's
action
not.
that they need to take. It's not transformative because
It's
it's
not.
meaningless.
No.
Or
And
it's
especially if people
meaningful.
say it's not just the money, their goal is to pay off debt. I'm like, that's not good enough.
Yeah,
Right?
you
Like,
got
yeah,
to give
you
them
have to,
something else.
we want to pay off debt, obviously, but that's not going to motivate you because you've already created it. Like,
Yeah.
so we need to focus on the income, but what is your big why? And I know, like, for me with, um, I took my business seriously when I wanted to buy a horse property. And, for years I'd kind of talked about it, but I hadn't even looked at prices or called a realtor, right? And I remember I was in North Carolina. I was at an event that my mentor had on, and he wanted everybody to know, like, well, what number would be your quantum leap a year from now, dollar wise, right? And I could not come up with a number. I'm like, I don't know. Like, at the time, the house we owned was paid for. um, the ranch isn't. It's a bit of a bigger investment. But so, I mean, I was living pretty comfortably. Like, there was not a lot of risk. I mean, yes, I was investing in a six-figure mentor, so there was that amount of risk, right? Um, but and my business was covering it. But, like, I was do you know what I mean? Like, I was comfortable. Like, there
Yeah.
was, so if I was going to double or triple my income, what for? I was covering the bills. I was living comfortably. We had a boat. We traveled. Like, what for, right? So, and I couldn't come up with a number. I'm like, I don't know what that number should be. And he goes, well, what do you really want? And I said, well, I want a horse property. He goes, well, what'll that cost you? And I said, well, it'll cost this. And he's like, okay, that's your quantum leap. And I, I literally said to him in front of the room, I'm like, all right, dude, gotcha. 1 year and 2 days till the date, paperwork was signed on the sale of my other property and purchase of this one.
Oh, wow.
So, but it was having that real
Tangible.
tangible thing behind it, right? And so, I look now and I'm like, okay, well, what do my income goals need to be? So they have to include being able to take care of the horses, right? So there's a motivation behind that would affect my pricing that maybe wouldn't have somewhere else, right? So um, when you have that, and then for me too, like, the motivation's even stronger because I want to bring awareness to the equine industry and treating horses as sentient beings and helping us raise the consciousness of the planet through horses and helping us, like, I'm a real firm believer in positive reinforcement. with horses, which is, believe it or not, that's actually a very controversial way of training, which is really
What do you mean?
because you use food to train them, so you
Uh,
reward them. Versus, well, like within a training model, like there's four things. There's positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement.
yes.
So positive punishment and negative reinforcement are two really big things in the horse industry, right? Like the horse misbehaves, you whack them. That's positive punishment because you're adding something, right? It's not
Oh,
that it's
as opposed to positive.
as in good feeling, like it's an
Yeah.
addition, right? And
Okay.
negative reinforcement is you take an aversive away when they give you what you want. And the negative punishment is like if they're being an idiot, you take their treats away, right? So you take something good away versus take something bad away. Positive reinforcement is the horse does what you want, you give them a cookie or a praise or a scratch or something, right?
So basically, I need to backtrack on this. This is
Sure.
new to me.
Yeah.
So the first three things that you said there, I won't get the combinations of
Yeah.
positive, negative, and
Yeah.
reinforcement, but it sounded to me like the first three all involve some form of pain or deprivation
Or discomfort.
or discomfort.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
well, discomfort is painful.
Yeah. So
Like,
like they're uncomfortable, it's pressure. So for me, and it's really funny because, yet rewarding them is considered controversial.
and why is that?
Just old school thinking, right? It's just the
Before I
way it's
jump
always
to
been done.
judgment on the thing.
It's
So,
the way it's always been done. Now I use a combination of negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement because my horse was trained with negative reinforcement. So it's just he does it right, you take the pressure off, right? And sometimes the pressure is just like you're waving your finger. It's not
okay,
necessarily bad, but it's just
right, he
something that they
knows.
don't want you waving your finger, or you raise your voice and they stop, right? Sometimes there's a place for positive punishment, like if someone's about to die and you need the horse to get out of the way and you need to put a stick in front, like you're going to keep everybody safe, right? But so for me, getting this message out there that there's a better way, that you can have a relationship-based training, a positive-based training, that gets me out of bed in the morning more than $1 million ever would. But
Oh,
to be able to do that, I have to run a business that has a high overhead. So therefore, I have to have a different income goal, right? I know I kind of went off on a tangent there a little bit,
no,
but
but it
bringing it
works
back,
because it explains that it
bring
it
it back to
it has
why
psychology
the income
around it.
goal is there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It totally it on one hand it validates the income goal.
yeah,
And I know we started off talking about marketing, but now we're just like into the crux of the thing, which is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Um oh, I had something really good, Nafissa. I know what it was. So you're describing the horses and you're saying, the negative, the removal of the negative. I'm
Mm,
wagging my finger at
yeah,
Nafissa right now for
yeah,
the audio
yeah,
only format.
yeah.
So that negative, so I haven't experienced an affinity for horses to this point in my life. I won't even get into anything about that. There's nothing dramatic. I just haven't. They scare me. They're bigger than me. They've got a mind of their own. But when I think,
I got to get you in an arena with one of them then.
yeah, okay,
All your stuff would come up.
Nafissa just threw down. And I'm supposed to come and see you in Maple Ridge. So
Yes.
yeah, so okay, we'll make that
Yeah.
happen. But what you made me think of is
Mhm.
the animal that I have the most experience with. She's no longer with us right now, but my dog Brandy.
Mhm.
And my dog Brandy was she was a border collie cross,
Mhm.
highly, highly intelligent, highly, highly sensitive. And if I so much as, because she was tuned to me, if
Yeah.
I so much as threw her a sideways glance,
Mhm.
let alone wagged a finger, or like we knew how to
Yeah.
communicate with each other without words,
Mhm.
I could pretty much, well, who am I kidding? She was alpha as well. So
Yeah.
we were always,
Yeah.
parrying for that control and influence.
Mhm.
But that would be devastating to that little dog.
Yeah.
I imagine from the sensibilities that you've described with your horses offline, and I want to get into them right now,
Mhm.
that the horses are at least as sensitive as my Brandy was. And
They
can we please
really are.
get into that? Because
They
is
really are.
that why you work with them and the what they bring in?
Totally. I mean, I've gone through personal transformation with my horse because I used to be terrified of my own horse. If you go look on my Believe in Sea Ranch Instagram page, I have a picture of him throwing a fit at the gate the other day, and it is so funny.
I
Um,
saw it.
he's stomping his feet like, and it's hilarious, right? And I mean, that would have terrified me. I was sitting there like, like I have a different perspective right now that would have scared me. And but I look at this as my horse is we're having a conversation here and he's mad at me. And if I get close to him, and you can't see that on the camera because I can't, I mean, I had to put it away for my own safety. But I was able to walk out in that ring with him there and he backed up very respectfully. So he doesn't, he knows the boundary and that's a really important thing. But I like that he feels safe enough that he can let me know that he's really angry because he didn't find out, basically he didn't find all the cookies that I hid for him out there and he wanted back for lunch. I mean, this is really dramatic. So
Yeah.
it was
High
funny.
drama folks here on Free Your Inner Guru today.
Yeah, I know. So
Cookie.
but the fact that he could do that is to me really important. And when I first got him, I mean, I'm a bit of an accidental horseman. I was working with total traditional horsemanship. So there was a lot of positive punishment. I was told, always put a chain on his nose. Don't go in his stall without a stick so that he knows if he misbehaves, he's going to get a whack. And these were things that I didn't know anything about horsemanship at the time. And like, he's 1,000 pounds and I was scared. And so I listened to them. But I remember thinking like, because he used to be really bad with his feet. I mean, picking up his feet, you could get kicked, right? So there was a little bit of is it a him or I kind of thing. And but I remember thinking, I don't like this. What if he really likes his forehead scratch? What if he gives me his foot and then I scratch his forehead instead? But I knew nothing about training. It was just instinctive to me, like he likes that. So I started to do that. I mean, now it's like 12 years later, I can't go from one foot to the other without scratching his forehead or he gets really upset. But I don't need a stick and I can actually clean his feet out without him even being tied up, right? But I didn't know that at the time. And so that's how I first learned, and I had a lot of fear. And then I started to learn natural horsemanship, which is a little bit more about the whole part about negative reinforcement and relationship. And it was a pathway to me into positive reinforcement. Like, and in the natural horsemanship world, they do a lot of the negative reinforcement. So to kind of give you like maybe like a idea of what it would look like, right? So an instance where I used positive punishment this year because I had to for a safety measure. I had moved my horse from one stall to another because we'd had a snowstorm and there was too much ice in his. There was still snow and ice in the one he was in, but it was safer. But he had a complete meltdown and he couldn't get his thoughts together. I couldn't go in the paddock with him. He was running back and forth. He was going to slip and break a leg and I couldn't get his
Oh,
attention. So I took my carrot stick and I was in the other paddock and I leaned over the back and I mean, I just whacked his butt to snap him out of it, right? And the other horse leaned over and snapped at him too. Like we both went at him from both sides. And then he was like, I'm good. Right. And he stopped.
yeah.
But that was a case where his life was literally in danger and he had to get his brain together. But I didn't do it with anger. I didn't do it with, any, the
And
intention was you're going to fall, right? Um, Negative reinforcement would be if I was in that environment and he was standing there, I need to open the door. If I just moved the stick like this, not touching him, but just made a little pressure with the stick, the minute he moves back, I stop making the pressure with the stick. So he learns he's done the right thing. Positive reinforcement would be like, can you move? He moves, he gets a cookie.
I
So there's three different things and each one will have its appropriate place. So negative reinforcement is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're still creating a bit of an aversive. Like if you think about you see a horse riding, they have a bit in their mouth, right? So when somebody pulls the reins for them to stop, that's negative reinforcement because the moment they stop, you loosen the rein, right? So
right.
there's things that we do all the time. So I learned how to use negative reinforcement and build relationship with my horse. And then I got more into studying deeper about the positive reinforcement. So it's been a journey and to see all the different uh, transformation. And so I look at my horse and when I got him, he was too much horse for me, but he was labeled a bad horse, a jerk, this, that, whatever. And he is so trustworthy right now because I've taken that time to build that relationship. So when he feels confident throwing a fit, the person that I got him from, she would have beat the snot out of him for doing that at the gate. I just was like,
Mm.
dude, you're not coming in because you're in no shape for me to be around you right now. Like, so when you get into shape, I will come and help you. And he knows that, right? So I've had clients come here and pick his feet because I can trust him, because we've built that up over time. And because I've seen that transformation happen with a horse that really was difficult. Like, he really was. I now know the power of that, and I would love to be a voice into, well, what if they never had to go through being beaten or hit? Like, because he was 14 when I got him, and he'd been through a lot. So what would it be like? And I've seen it, and I know it works, and the depth of relationship and the bond the horse will make with you, because now it's fun to be with you. Um, it's really cool. And so for me, having that message, so not only do they help people and work with people, I love to show the behind the scenes of, like, okay, well, these are some of the things that we do to help them. And so that's my why, like, to just get out there and show that and give them that opportunity.
In your the work you do with people and the
Hmm.
horses,
Hmm.
when you had me at alchemy, by the way. Um, Tell me about the power of the horse in personal transformation.
Okay, so horses are prey animals. So there's two aspects to this. We can look at the woo side and the scientific side, because they're
Oh,
both there.
yes, please, to the woo side.
So so
So,
so we'll talk about both, right?
yeah.
So we'll start with the science of it. They're prey animals. Um, their life depends on knowing whether that bear or tiger that walks by is hungry or full, right? And so they pick up on their energy. They need to know whether they need to get the heck out of there, right? And emotional incongruency is something that they don't feel comfortable with at all, because that's a threat to them, because something's not right. You are not what you are on the inside is not what you are on the outside. You might eat me. Like, that's literally how they're wired.
So that's like talking about a human being and talking about our fight or flight response for actually, for
Yeah.
example, it's almost literally the same thing. It's how they sense that threat to
Yeah.
their well-being.
Yeah. So if somebody comes up to them, especially somebody that they don't know, and that person, people say, oh, don't act afraid, they'll sniff that out. Like, they would rather know that you're afraid, right? So if you're scared and you're acting brave, they're going to be scared of you. They're going to walk away. If you're completely in your head, they're not going to be comfortable. They need you to be in your body to feel safe. That for you to be embodied and grounded, for them to be safe. And so I'm still on the scientific side of things, right? So when you think about the fact that your body really is a representation of your subconscious mind, how you bring yourself forward is what's going on inside you. A really simple exercise is, if you were like setting a vision or a goal, or even, and I've done this with people, we've talked about their pricing strategy, and I get them to lead the horse while talking about their pricing strategy. You know how many times the horse will not follow that person,
Mm.
because they're from a horsemanship perspective, if you're not confident walking that horse, they're not going to follow you.
Right.
So if you're talking about your pricing strategy and you're focused on that, and you kind of it,
Start to
if you're
shrink or cringe or
so they
waver.
they don't know what you're talking about. All they know is you're not safe because you're not comfortable, right? So that's one aspect of it. On the more energetic woo side of things, they are energetic beings. Um, there was a study done by the HeartMath Institute that shows how horses and humans can co-regulate their heartbeats, and how the horse affects the human's heart rate variability when you get into like a heart lock with them. And so being around them and being around their energy, and you don't have to be right up close to them, I mean, because their heart field is way bigger than ours, you can still connect into that, and they can connect into you, and they read your energy. And so how they react to different things is really telling. And so I can tell if a client's just tell me what they think I want to hear based on the horse's reaction to them. And if we do like belief change or whole brain exercises where we're doing crossovers and stuff like that, we're with their it's a modality that I work in. I can tell when the person's come into an internal alignment because the way they present, the horse will start to relax and lick and chew.
Mm.
So it's pretty wild because they help you see what's going on. And I had a client here one day, and it was really funny. Um, and she's somebody I knew really well, and one of the things she had trouble with was like sales, right? And I had her with my pony is brutal. Like he doesn't care. He's blunt. He will just leave, run away from you. Like he's just brutal. So I call him my master energy alchemist. So I said, go make a connection with Jake. And I was watching her, and I said, how do you think you're doing? And she says, oh, I think we're connected. I'm like, no, that pony's like, the only reason he's not running away is because there's a fence there, right? So we did some coaching, a meditation, and then she sat down, and I said, I just want you to do a meditation and visualize like what you kind of see where you're going. And I could see her body start to relax. And in that moment, the pony came over, licked her from head to toe,
Oh gosh.
which was amazing, right?
Like
Um,
polar opposite.
total. And, for him to do that, he had to feel very safe with how she was showing up. Otherwise, he doesn't care. He just leaves. He had somebody reduced to tears here one day because she could not connect with him. So there's a lot that can come up, and also too, like especially like I said, I'd love to throw you in the ring because if you don't have that relationship with horses, it can really bring a lot up. I had a client here one time, and I took her in with we have a huge warm blood here. He's 17 hands. He's huge. He's a little bit handicapped, so he looks like he's about to spook or bolt, but he's just trying to stand still. And he's here because he's not a show horse, but he's a lovable creature, so he has a home here, right? So I brought her into the ring with him, and it was really funny. She wanted to work with him. She wanted to be with this horse, and we got in there, and I had him on a lead rope. And as soon as he kind of waddled, it was so funny. She took me, threw me in front of him, and I was like, okay, let's take you
Human
out, right?
shield style.
Yeah. And I let him go. And so, in coaching, at that moment I stepped out of facilitator, kind of did the pull the curtain down thing. And I said, I just want you to know that you're safe. I would never put you in a situation that you didn't feel safe, but we won't go back in there. But just so that there was no danger. That's just how he stands, right? And she said something to me, and I thought we'd stepped out of coaching mode. And this is what was fascinating. She said, I trust you that you would never put me in danger, but I didn't think you were reading that horse correctly. And I said, so you didn't trust my judgment? She's like, no. Where else is that coming up?
Yeah.
And it was not part of our planned curriculum for the day, but what came up, and it was something that I had observed in her that has been holding her back for so long. And it just started this, we were going in to work on, okay, going after that big client or whatever, right? Because he's this big, fancy, beautiful horse and he's huge. But what came up in that 40 seconds was such a visceral fear that she wouldn't have been ready for me to go there and ask those questions. Like it would have been an area that, how people can be, I'm not ready to have that. Not ready to go there. But she went there because the visceral fear of what happened in that moment brought up.
It brings up the pattern
of her not trusting other people's judgment.
Yeah.
Or their intentions.
That's the beauty of and the power of a real coaching conversation.
Yeah.
The one where it's about inquiry versus outright advising. And I know for me, it's always been kind of some people say, Laura, you're being into semantics, but I think words are really important. And for me, coaching means powerful inquisition and inquiry, and consulting means powerful advising. Two entirely different modalities.
And it can be mentoring too, but it's still not coaching.
No, that's right.
It's the curiosity that's the coaching.
Yeah, and there's so much under. You okay to talk a little bit just about coaching in general?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so like under the what okay, so you've shared what one of the things that you're very passionate about
Hmm.
is about transforming how horses are treated.
Yeah.
I'm my parallel passion is transforming how people think about self-help and coaching.
Hmm.
So this is now in both of our wheelhouses
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
transformation goes. So um, there's this huge umbrella called coach,
Yeah.
and my son, there's a whole bunch of things going on under that umbrella, from consulting, advising, um, managing,
Yeah.
down to at the other end of the spectrum what I would consider, and I take it from your reactions there, that like the inquiry and the helping to raise the self-awareness
Hmm.
is the meat and core of what coaching is intended to be.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So where do we the last few years as I've been here in Toronto, many people are familiar with, but if there's new listeners, I'm from Toronto, but I lived in BC for
Hmm.
9 years and then met Nafissa back here in Toronto. So we have this affinity for for the like the West as well as everything else. But all those years, I have found that there is when I came back here and I was starting from scratch with not much of a network, I left my automotive work there. I wasn't
Hmm.
interested in developing it to be online or anything when we came
Hmm.
back in 2014. And and Toronto is like has an well everywhere has an abundance of coaches.
Yeah.
And I got tired of hearing, just another coach or dime a dozen or everyone's a coach now.
Yeah.
And I don't really think everyone's a coach now. I think there's lots of coaches, but I don't think all of what goes on is coaching.
I don't think so.
Are we
I
splitting
mean,
hairs? Like, am I like,
somebody like I talked to you about it earlier. I mean, if somebody's helping me set up my Instagram page, they're it's like a marketing consultant. They're not coaching me. And I know sometimes the word consultant can have a couple of different meanings because a consultant can either do a work product, or they can provide advice, right? So people maybe they don't want to do the work product, they want to teach you, but that's not coaching. And um,
do you think most people understand that that's what coaching is, or do you think it's most people just understand that this is someone who's going to, in some capacity, help me or guide me?
I think it's the latter. And even clients that I've had, I mean, I've had quite a few. Some really want coaching, and some are looking for um, advice. They don't want to go deep. And so one of the things that I've really been thinking about as a lot of this has been happening is, well, who do I want to work with? You know, because I want to work with the people that want to go deep. Because I mean,
Oh, I hear that.
I know people who can do a funnel for you, and it's not me. And um, I can help you look at your numbers really quickly and give you some pretty quick business advice. I've had my share, but it's not interesting to me because you know, selling, there's a ton of effective scripts out there. So I can give you one, sure. But I want to know why you won't have the conversation. I want to know what you're afraid of. I want to know why you don't believe in it. I want to know who in your world won't approve of you creating what you want that you're letting affect you. So that's more interesting to me. And how do you get out of your own way? That's more fun.
And that's where the investment in the time, energy,
Yep.
and money far outstrips the length of the relationship
Yep.
itself. Right? To me, the value of the coaching relationship should extend well beyond
Yep. Well,
the
and I
6 months,
actually
12
had a
months.
sales call with someone the other day. He ended up not going forward, and I actually, if he was going to go forward, I was actually going to say no, because it was really interesting. He wanted to work with me for 4 months because I do have a 4-month container, and he wanted to learn how to sell. And um, he wanted to be absolutely sure that he would get results in those
Mm.
4 months. And I said to him, well, here's the thing. You don't actually have a strong marketing thing behind you right now to have the qualified leads. Like you're just going on Instagram and messaging people. Those aren't necessarily qualified leads. You haven't done the marketing, the nurturing, and all of that. I can help you with some of that, but I have
Yeah.
people I can refer you to.
The business of that. It's two
Yeah.
different things.
However, what you learn with me will have results if you do it, but it may not happen in 4 months. It may happen 6 months later or a year later. It's just this transforming piece that has to happen. And but he wanted to be absolutely guaranteed that he was going to have,
Yeah,
you know,
I've run into that too. And I absolutely, absolutely understand why. Because and I think there's the reasons are as unique as the individual, but what I don't know that anyone would, well, there are some people that would just hire a coach just because they like having a coach and they want to do the introspection and
yeah,
they want that perspective.
yeah,
And it's valuable, but they're less concerned about it turning into any kind of tangible result. And that's a bit of I'm using the word unicorn a lot lately, but I'm
yeah,
using it. And it's great and it's fun, but if it's even better when there's a practical application to it, because how are we going to manifest a better world or a different world
yeah,
if we're not taking what we're doing on the inside and bringing it outwards with some form of value.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but sometimes it just takes time for
Yeah,
it to happen. But that transformation can be happening right away, and the manifestation of it can happen quickly or not. It just really depends on a lot of things, right? So
I
I
do
think
also
that,
I do also think that it also depends on whether or not that person is really ready at that time in their life for the change or to take the associated action.
yeah,
But also I'm curious to know if you've run into this as well, but there's perhaps some um, earned distrust in the market because the the market is kind of diluted.
I think so. I mean, I'd be really careful who I hired. I am careful who I hire
We're
and
both
work with.
making faces now.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
market is diluted, and maybe diluted's not the right word. Um,
You find one then.
sullied or dirtied,
Dirtied.
you know,
Yeah.
because I mean, you know, coaching isn't about giving advice, right? It's not necessarily mentoring. And at the same time, though, without that life experience or depth of understanding, how can you actually know the right question to ask with a curiosity? Because sometimes what's not being said by the client is way more important than what is being said. And taking an opportunity to hear what's in the silence and then ask a really difficult question and then shutting up, that takes maturity, and that takes life experience, and it takes training, and it takes um, I mean, and I'm pretty passionate about training and self-development, because I know, like, if people look at a coach from a perspective of this person does have power, like it's just natural. You want to know that they know what they're doing, because they can do harm. Even if they're not a trained coach, they can do harm with the wrong question or the wrong thing, or and mess somebody up. So I think it's, yeah, and there's a bit of a pyramid thing that can happen too, right? So
I'm not sure I heard you correctly there.
pyramid, like
Oh,
a coach to teach a coach to teach a coach to teach a coach, but it's not really getting to helping a person create what they want for themselves
yes.
and holding that space for them, right? In my corporate days, like some of the things that I had to deal with in corporate would have people under the table curled up in the fetal position, and we had deaths on site, right? Like we were there.
Right.
I
Mine.
wasn't at site when that happened,
Yeah.
but it affected everybody. Two kids broke the rules. They went, two of them in a lift, and the lift tipped over. It was horrible. Um, but when you've experienced that kind of stuff, when you've seen your, like, in the downturn 2008, because I was on this project, I was somewhat protected. But when I saw people that I'd worked with for years, good people just like that, all lose their jobs overnight, and you're seeing all this happen, right? Like it gives you a little bit of depth of gravitas to like understand, like, the human part of it, of coaching. And
Yeah,
so I think sometimes there's, um, I, I do think, I firmly believe that in coaching, a good coach has a lot of life experience. And that life experience isn't, I was broke 3 months ago and now I just sold $30,000. That's not life
that's
experience,
not going to cut it.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You remind me of when I was consulting. So this would be actually back at that, the 0809 was such a seminal period of time for, well, I guess it also, we were both in our, you would, or early 40s
Yeah.
at the time. And it's like, I was like this sheer ball of enthusiasm coming out of teaching, going into sales, motivated by Ireland, and then starting my own consulting company. And that was fantastic because my experience as a teacher and selling and learning the car business through best practices really
Hmm.
set me up well for the consulting.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I did that for I think 14 years in total, exclusively. In the latter part of those years, my husband and I opened up a gym in Vernon, BC.
Hmm.
We were living in Kelowna, opened it up in Vernon. And from the moment that I had a payroll, a commercial property, a landlord, retail customers, you name it, the list, all the vendors,
Yeah.
it was only then that I really saw some of um, I understood the sheer amount of faith that my clients had in the work I was doing with them,
Hmm.
because the advice I was giving them would always involve some kind of either brick and mortar, HR,
Yeah.
or technology investment, plus the investment in me
Yeah.
to go in and make it work. And having that experience changed my entire point of view on
Yeah.
what it was to own and operate a business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is more than we can. I think most coaches are people who get into helping and serving, are highly empathetic people at their
Yeah.
core. But until I had that experience, I the level of empathy that I could have for them was very, very limited.
Yeah.
And I think empathy is at the core. It's one of the coaching superpowers to really be able to get
Yes.
in their, almost like in their body, so you can read what would be happening with them,
Yeah.
not unlike the horse.
No, and they're great because they can bring out stuff that I might like that one person, we wouldn't have gone there if that hadn't happened, right? Where she didn't trust my ability to read him. So it was, it's just fascinating. And when you can ask those questions and it can come up, what can actually transform for a person, because you can release a pattern that's been holding you back all the time, right? And um, that goes way further than a fancy Instagram page. I mean, and I just, like, I will be honest, I get burnt out. Like, I mean, I haven't really posted much on Instagram ever since this lockdown started. I had a team member doing it, and she would come after me going, we need new photos, we need new photos. I'd be like, I don't want to take another photo shoot, right? Because that to me did not feel like, what the heck does, really fancy pictures of me have to do with, like, I know you have to do it, but at the same time, it just felt so like, I don't want to. I mean, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do the pictures. I have more fun with my Believe in Sea Ranch page because those aren't perfect pictures. I just take my iPhone, I get the horses doing their stuff, I have them videoing, and it's life. And to me, that's kind of where it's at,
Well,
right?
it's interesting to me because if we were coaching right now, if I was the coach and you were the client, I would be talking to you about, and I know you're already transforming in that direction anyways,
Yeah.
like follow the energy.
Yeah.
Follow the energy.
Yeah.
If you and I are a lot alike in this regard. I can't stand having to put all those photos up. And again, I get why, and I do it. But recently, my transition, and we were sharing before we got on here, and I
Yeah.
think it's great for people who listen to hear this side of it,
Yeah.
and I hope they do too. um,
Yeah.
is like I've been using all of my creative skills in service of the marketing for coaching.
Yep.
And that makes it joyless for me.
Yep.
That sucks the life out of me to do that. Whereas if I am sitting to write, to self-express, to photograph, to take in the world around me,
Yep.
and to podcast, to use my voice and speak with amazing people like yourself, and coach, I am absolutely in my element.
Mm-hmm.
So before we went on vacation, like I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine, Lori Rubenstein. She's a wonderful coach in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling her from Kauai, I'm like, I think I need to burn it down. And she was like, oh no, like, like, and I
Yeah.
was like, and guess what happened in the wake of COVID? It got, a lot of that got taken care of for me,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Because nothing makes me happier. You know how Ireland was my thing?
Yeah.
Nothing makes me happier than being on the ground using my camp. Like, that's where the stuff of life is for me.
Yep.
So that's why the shift in the model towards the community, the community model versus
Yep.
this one-to-one, always looking at Zoom, irony noted, given pandemic, you know, into something that allows me to kind of bring all parts of myself forward.
Well, and I think people are going to be sick of Zoom. So,
Well, I
because
was
it's
sick
all we have right now, right?
years ago, but now
Right.
it's,
So
yeah,
it's and I, I know, I mean, I can't have people here right now, so it is a little bit heartbreaking, but I do know that that's kind of where I'm being pulled to go. So it's twofold, right? One is the work with people, the private coaching, the healing work. There's gonna be a lot of healing that has to happen, and this herd is great for that. But also on there's no monetization of it at all. The whole piece about the treatment of horses, because I'm not a horse trainer, right? And
right.
that's something I'd like to learn in my spare time, but it's not really. I can't see myself going from barn to barn to barn doing this. It's not. I don't want to get into that drama or politics, but if I can have a platform of of talking about it and having people go, hey, that was kind of neat. Like I had somebody the other day who would have been a traditional um, horse person. She saw that I had done a treasure hunt and she's like, that was the coolest idea I've ever seen. Right. So when people start to just kind of come around, then I know if I can affect one person, then they can maybe affect someone else. So it's twofold. And that's kind of where I want to kind of go with my business is really it's the transformation of human and horses, right? So
Yeah.
that's, and the two go together, and
And you get
this
to
whole,
do it just by showing up and being you
yeah,
versus conforming to some other outside idea of what
yeah.
you should be or look like when
Well,
you
like
present yourself.
it's funny. I remember a few years ago, I went to, because I used to go to these events all the time. I'd wear these really high heels that I couldn't walk in and pretty dresses. And then I went to one, it's the mentor I have now, but he keeps the room so cold. And so I had all these really cute dresses and high heels and I couldn't wear them. I had to go put on my leggings and boots and wrap in a blanket.
And blankets, yeah.
And I was so comfortable. And I don't wear high heels or dresses anymore. And I mean, I've gone to events, like events where with coaches, and I'm wearing a plaid shirt, and I don't care. Like I got my plaid cowgirl shirt, not even a cowgirl shirt. It's like a farm girl shirt. I got it's purple. It's my brand colors. It's my purple plaid shirt with my purple snakeskin cowboy boots and jeans, and I'm comfortable.
And you're you, and you're
Yeah.
memorable because of it.
Yeah, because I'm just not gonna, like, I don't need all that fancy stuff because it's not. I mean, although it's kind of funny, there's a joke, right? Like with horse people, if you're wearing your horse clothes, you usually are the most expensively dressed person in the store. You just smell like a street bum. But it's like it's just nobody would know. But that's one of the things that I let go is like I don't dress that way. I don't.
And it's
And so
not, and it's not to say, like, I will still, and I imagine perhaps we both will, like, you go to a
mhm.
wedding, you go to an event, you go to something fancy, you get out to be able, I would love to put on a pair of heels and go and get dressed up and go out right now. But that does any more than when I was a waitress
Mhm.
35 years ago.
Yeah.
that shouldn't have to be what I need to wear in order to make my tips,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's really, I think, I'm hoping, um as we bring this to a close, I'm really hoping that, no, I'm intending that
Mhm.
this time of being kept at home and isolated and going inside
Mhm.
to really figure out what's important to a person. And I don't
Yeah.
mean just me or just you. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that everyone is doing it.
Mhm.
And that when we get to work again and go out and socialize again, that it doesn't all just go to the wayside. I think it's too big to do that. I think it's going to be a long time before we get into a new normal. I
Yeah.
don't say that to scare anyone. I just say that for my own mental preparedness.
Yeah.
um, I don't want to forget the lessons of this time.
I
Again,
know.
I've had these lessons before. I've been called to the creative life before, and I've always managed to put something in, to make something else be more important or someone else be more important. And now it's like that spiral journey, right? You come back to it
Yeah.
and you come back to it. And I'll
Yeah.
probably be coming back to it on different levels my entire life because that's the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I hope people do take advantage of this time because, um, I had a lot of freedom when this happened, and still there was a lot of introspection that had to happen. But I know when you're in that rat race, it's a lot harder to do that because you got to get up, you got to get on the train, you got to get here, you got to go there, you got to have your water cooler talk. Now people are working from home and having a lot more time. um, I just hope that people start to go like, is this really what I want to do? Because the one thing to remember is like with crisis is the mother of ingenuity, and within every crisis and I'm not minimizing the tragedy that has unfolded, like that there's no doubt it's an incredible tragedy, and for a lot of people it's a huge opportunity rebirth themselves.
Mhm.
um
And
I've
realign.
yes I've been conscious, and I'm going to be doing a post about this, that I'm tired of hearing the words about in these uncertain times and this time of crisis, and because that feeds it, right? um, there is some serious crap going on. Like, don't minimizing that. But here's the thing that I really, this was my big aha moment through all of this. There is no such thing as safety. There wasn't 3 months ago, right? Everybody goes through stuff. Everybody has crisis. I mean, I watched my mother die, right? Like, I mean, we all go through this stuff in our life. We have uncertainties. We lose jobs. We lose clients. We had a big scare in my husband's business where we thought we were going to have a huge problem back in November, right? Everybody goes through that. And we all have crisis. We all have uncertainty. It just so happens the whole world's having it at once.
Yes,
So it feels bad, but we all have it at different times. So what if we just rephrase this to a time of opportunity, to different times, a pause, creative times? That'll help us get out of it faster.
absolutely. I agree with you. And I think the shift is in also realizing that we wouldn't be here living and breathing if humans couldn't adapt.
No.
And similarly, um, I just released a podcast today about, I was in a no unfiltered mode yesterday
Mm-hmm.
with after having to go to the hospital for my eyes. And I did a podcast on the whole idea of this, of pandemic pivot, and how tired I am of hearing the word pivot
Yes.
and why. And so I'm writing that up into an article next. So
Mm-hmm.
what I want to do is, when you finish yours, send it to me. I'll put the link in the body of these show notes.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
drop well, on the podcast, it'll be easy to find. It'll be one or two behind this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think we need to amplify the really rich opportunity that is here without negating the suffering. But I do know from my own journey
Mm-hmm.
that the lows can be really, really low,
Yep.
but when we can step through them, and do the heavy lifting to heal it or transform it or even just face it. Let's start with facing it
Yeah.
as opposed to numbing or distracting or just plain old avoiding. Um, the upside, many years later, we are able to integrate all of this. I trust in humanity's ability to integrate this,
Mm-hmm.
but I trust in it more if people who are have great big hearts and minds and intuitive abilities and sensibilities about the earth that we live on, if they step forward,
Yeah.
if we step forward into leadership now,
Yeah. And I think that's,
and we have to amplify each other.
we do, because it can be so easy to be pulled into this negative spiral of news and comments and, you know, like Facebook, like social media comments are the worst place for anybody to put their mind, right? So, like, read the news, take what you need to be informed.
And then get on with it.
And also, but look deeper too, right? Because, headlines are so sensational and there's always a nugget of truth in them. And then when you dig deeper, you're like, okay, this isn't really what this article's about, or this isn't as bad as it sounds. It could be. It's a could be, but a nuclear bomb could be dropped on us tomorrow too. That could happen, right? Like
Yeah.
I could get hit by a car, but there's a lot of truth to it. And just before, I know we're at time, but just one example that I remember was reading an article about um, food crisis, and we're at food insecure. It was something like that, and I clicked on the link and I read the article, and it was an incredibly cool article that was talking about, and I think it was in the National Post. So the Vancouver Sun had posted this on their Facebook page and they put the sensational title. It was a really cool article about how, with what's been happening, local farmers and local like produce and meat farmers or whatever are seeing a surge in business and people getting back to organic food and whatever. And what they're worried about is that when things go back to normal, that they won't repeat the business that they've done.
That the
I was like,
herd that it will turn back into just going back. I think that's why we need to have these conversations, is like
yeah.
the change needs to be permanent, and I think the opportunity is there.
And I was like, why? So what? Then why isn't that article saying? Why is this article saying we're facing food scarcity, instead of saying we've changed how we buy? How do we help these farmers continue to thrive? Like, so there was a little bit of truth, right? A little bit of truth, because the plants are shut down and farmers are plowing stuff over. A little bit of truth, but the actual meat of that article was helping these small farmers. But the headline, and most people don't click
Amazing.
through, right? So
Right.
I think we need to be really cautious about what we take in, and just look at it as a big pause.
One quick thing before we go. This may end up being one of the longest episodes ever.
Sorry.
But it's okay. No, it's not. It's don't apologize. It's wonderful. So one of the reasons why I sent you a message on Facebook to book this, and this will be a great note to wrap on. You're in British Columbia.
Yes.
Dr. Bonnie Henry.
Hmm.
She has been
She's
a
amazing.
shining bright light, an example of incredible leadership.
Yeah.
And all I get to see is what I read on the Globe or see on television. Tell me what it's like to be led by her on a daily basis in British Columbia.
I watch the Bonnie Henry show every day, right? Because she comes on at noon or 3 o'clock. This might get Bill choked up. She's very calm. She's very reassuring. She's very mild, but she's very decisive. And because of her leadership, we're in a good place in this province. And we're going to come out of this. Um, our economy will probably recover sooner. You feel safe. She's very dedicated. She took action early. She says, well, some of it was luck, but no.
She didn't she say do not travel on March break?
Mhm.
Didn't So that's not luck. That's
No.
saying something that people do not want to hear before the 2 week March break in British Columbia.
Yeah.
Not 1 week
Yeah.
like here in
2 weeks.
Ontario.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
And she had been paying attention since January and putting stuff in place. Like, she's been preparing. So, and the fact is too, I mean, she never reads it like a bunch of statistics and numbers. She gets very emotional about the deaths and the cases. and relatively, I mean, she's done a phenomenal job. So we're in good hands here. And, you know, I just feel like, man, you know, everybody needs a Dr. Henry.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, she did all this, and British Columbia has one of the loosest shutdowns in the sense that the stuff is shut down. She's very clear which businesses had to stop. But they worked with WorkSafe, they worked with Fraser Health Authority, they worked with all these different health agencies to keep things like construction, manufacturing, a lot of businesses still operating and running. A lot of retail stores are doing curbside pickup, and I know a lot of provinces don't have that. So she kept, like they say, you know, well, we're not doing the big reopen in the sense that we didn't close that much. So we're already there and we're going to gradually go back. So she's done a phenomenal job.
From the point of view of distilling that down into some of the qualities of leadership, it's that, it's that preparation
Yeah.
meets empathy,
Yeah.
meets being willing to say what could be very unpopular.
Mm-hmm.
So courage,
Yeah.
I'll label that courage.
Yeah.
And I think she has demonstrated the power of being just like allowing yourself to be fully human.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously she's got a job to do, and yet she's showing up very, very human and therefore relatable, and people are listening. I know I'm very grateful. Our son is in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
He's still working, and he's he wouldn't know what to compare it to here, and even despite where Toronto's at, we've been in, it almost pains me to say this, but we've been in pretty good hands too. Somehow we got the right premier for this period.
It's really wild.
That's a whole other thing.
He has not lived up to expectations. He's done really well.
Let's leave that right where it is. I was saying, and I think I'm not the only one saying, I can't wait until I can start really disliking him again. But again, very measured, and I'm not blind to the other issues around him in
you know
normal
what
times.
our premier said yesterday, which I think would apply to yours as well, and it was so poignant because I wouldn't have voted necessarily for this government that we have or any of them, but I am so impressed with how Canada overall has handled this.
Oh.
And what our premier said yesterday was so profound. He said, there will come a time when politics comes back to British Columbia. Now is not the time.
I love it.
He was talking about the economic recovery and working with the leader of the opposition. And he said, I want you to consider your MLA's offices as a nonpartisan safe space. If you need help, they're not here to represent their party, they're here to represent you. And when he said that, I like that he acknowledged, yeah, we can be really partisan in any other amount of time, but now is not the time. Politics, we have time for that later.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening there too, right? Like it's just.
Yes, and of course we have the grand contrast to the south. So
Yeah.
it allows us to hold, as Canadians, it allows us to hold up a mirror that we're not used to looking at. It allows us to see our political leaders through a lens we're not accustomed to be looking through, because partisanship, you all out there beyond our borders think that we're a mild bunch. That's not the truth at all.
Oh my God.
Regionalism is alive and well in this country. I've lived at both ends, so have you.
Yeah.
There's, again, we'll just leave that for another time, but you'd be surprised. And to be able to watch all three levels of government cooperating, and given that, I bill myself a leadership coach, and everything we do is around leading right now, and being led. So, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge with great gratitude the work that is being done, and also to hold space for people who are struggling in that regard, and know that all things are temporary, and there will be a new normal, but the lessons of this time could be everlasting. And
Yeah,
I hope that they are, because it's
me too.
showing us a lot about what it really could mean to be a human being on this planet.
Yeah, and we've seen it from people you wouldn't expect to see it, which is amazing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So on that note, Nafissa,
Yes,
oh my gosh, what a
thank you.
great
It was a really long one.
Um, I hope everyone out there is enjoying this conversation as much as possible. I will put links to Nafissa's website, her social media for the ranch and for her in the show notes, along with everybody else that we have spoken about. And it's just been such a joy. I can't wait
Thank
to
you.
get this out there.
Yeah.
And do send me that article, because the moment I have it, I'll go back
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I'll
Might be
put.
a few days before I write it, but it's been percolating in my head. But yeah,
Yeah, go for it.
perfect.
It felt
All
really
right.
good to do that podcast about the pivot. So,
Awesome. Thank
all
you
right.
so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay,
Have
take
a
care.
great day. Bye.